What can you tell? What can you tell me about the historical development of the concept of prudence? The concept of prudence has a long and varied history, having been used in various contexts and evolving over time. Here is a brief overview of the historical development of the concept of prudence. 1. Ancient Greece and Rome. In ancient Greece and Rome, the concept of prudence was associated with practical wisdom and the ability to make sound decisions. The Greek philosopher Aristotle wrote extensively about the virtues, including prudence, which he defined as the ability to apply general knowledge to specific circumstances. 2. Medieval Christian thought. In medieval Christian thought, prudence was one of the four cardinal virtues, along with justice, fortitude, and temperance. It was seen as a moral quality that enabled individuals to make good decisions and act in a morally right manner. 3. Renaissance and early modern period. During the Renaissance and early modern period, the concept of prudence was associated with caution and the avoidance of risk. It was also seen as a key aspect of financial management and was valued in business and trade. 4. Enlightenment and modernity. During the Enlightenment, the concept of prudence was seen as a key aspect of rational decision-making and the application of reason to practical problems. In the modern era, the concept of prudence is often associated with financial management and investment, where it is used to describe the ability to make cautious and prudent decisions with regards to money. This is just a brief overview of the historical development of the concept of prudence. The precise meaning of prudence and its applications have varied throughout history and continue to evolve. However, at its core, the concept of prudence has been associated with the ability to make sound decisions and act in a wise and prudent manner. In Aristotle's view, what are some of the hazards in applying general knowledge to specific circumstances, and how does prudence mitigate these hazards? In Aristotle's view, there are several hazards in applying general knowledge to specific circumstances. One of these hazards is that individuals may apply general principles in an inflexible or rigid manner, failing to take into account the particularities of each situation. This can lead to poor decision-making and ineffective action. Another hazard is that individuals may become too focused on specific details and lose sight of the bigger picture. This can cause individuals to overlook important information or to miss opportunities to act in a wise and effective manner. Prudence, in Aristotle's view, helps to mitigate these hazards by enabling individuals to make wise and effective decisions in specific circumstances. Prudence involves the ability to apply general knowledge in a flexible and nuanced manner, taking into account the particularities of each situation. It also involves the ability to maintain a broad perspective and to see the bigger picture, enabling individuals to make wise decisions even in complex and challenging situations. In Aristotle's ethics, prudence is considered a cardinal virtue because it enables individuals to act in a wise and effective manner in a wide range of circumstances. By cultivating prudence, individuals can develop the ability to make good decisions and act in a virtuous manner, even in challenging and complex situations. Does Aristotle give any examples of broad perspectives or flexible applications of general knowledge in prudence? Yes, Aristotle provides several examples of the broad perspective and flexible application of general knowledge in his works. In his Nicomachean Ethics, Aristotle uses the example of a doctor to illustrate how prudence enables individuals to apply general knowledge in a flexible and nuanced manner. A doctor, for example, has general knowledge about health and illness, but must also take into account the particularities of each patient in order to make an effective diagnosis and treatment plan. The doctor must use his or her general knowledge in a flexible and nuanced manner, taking into account the patient's age, health, and other factors in order to provide the best possible care. Aristotle also provides the example of a general in battle to illustrate the importance of having a broad perspective and the ability to see the bigger picture. A good general must have general knowledge about military strategy and tactics, but must also take into account the particularities of each battle in order to make effective decisions. The general must maintain a broad perspective and be able to see the bigger picture, taking into account the strengths and weaknesses of his own forces and those of the enemy, in order to make wise decisions and act effectively in battle. These are just a few examples of how Aristotle illustrates the importance of having a broad perspective and the ability to apply general knowledge in a flexible and nuanced manner in his works. Through these examples, Aristotle demonstrates how prudence enables individuals to make wise and effective decisions in specific circumstances. In the medieval Christian view of prudence, how does a moral quality help a person make good decisions and act in a morally right manner? In the medieval Christian view, prudence was considered one of the four cardinal virtues, along with justice, fortitude, and temperance. Prudence was seen as the ability to judge and make wise decisions in moral matters, and it was believed to help a person act in a morally right manner. The medieval Christian view held that a virtuous person, through the practice of prudence, could use reason and experience to make prudent decisions, leading to a virtuous life. By making good decisions and acting in a morally right manner, a person was thought to be fulfilling their obligations to God and others and to be on the path toward salvation. Can you expand in much greater detail why prudence, or the ability to judge and make wise decisions in moral matters, was an obligation to God and other people for medieval Christians? Certainly. In the medieval Christian view, the ability to make wise decisions in moral matters, or prudence, was considered an obligation to God and other people because it was seen as the means by which one could fulfill one's duty to live a virtuous life. According to this view, a virtuous life was necessary in order to attain salvation and live in accordance with God's will. Prudence was seen as the foundation of all the other cardinal virtues and was thought to be the key to making good moral decisions. A person who was prudent was believed to be able to consider the circumstances of a particular situation, weigh the options available, and make the best possible decision based on their knowledge and experience. By doing so, they were able to act in a manner that was consistent with God's will and the moral law. In addition, the ability to make good decisions was also seen as an obligation to other people. A prudent person was expected to consider the consequences of their actions not only for themselves, but for others as well. By making decisions that were in accordance with God's will and the moral law, a person was thought to be fulfilling their duty to love their neighbor and to act justly. In the medieval Christian view, therefore, prudence was seen as an essential component of a virtuous life, and was considered to be a means by which a person could fulfill their obligations to God and others. Through the practice of prudence, a person was believed to be able to make good decisions, act in a morally right manner, and attain salvation. Why did they have a duty to live a virtuous life? Medieval Christians believed that they had a duty to live a virtuous life because it was seen as the way to attain salvation and live in accordance with God's will. According to Christian teachings, all human beings have a divine origin and a purpose to fulfill in this life. This purpose was believed to be to live a virtuous life, to follow the commandments of God, and to attain eternal life in heaven. In the medieval Christian view, living a virtuous life was seen as the means by which a person could achieve this ultimate goal of salvation. Virtuous living was believed to be a matter of fulfilling one's obligations to God and to others, and of living in accordance with the moral law. By living a virtuous life, a person was thought to be able to develop the qualities of character that were necessary to attain salvation, such as faith, hope, charity, and the cardinal virtues. The duty to live a virtuous life was seen as an inescapable obligation for all people, regardless of their social status, wealth, or occupation. It was believed that everyone was capable of living a virtuous life, and that the practice of virtue was a matter of making the effort to do so. In conclusion, medieval Christians believed that they had a duty to live a virtuous life because it was seen as the path to salvation and the means by which they could fulfill their obligations to God and others. By living a virtuous life, a person was thought to be able to attain eternal life in heaven and to live in accordance with God's will. The ability to make good moral decisions, live virtuously, and achieve salvation does not specifically explain what prudence meant for medieval Christians. Can you give me some medieval examples or stories about what prudence means for them? Sure. In the medieval Christian tradition, there are many examples and stories that illustrate the meaning of prudence and how it was practiced in daily life. Here are a few. The parable of the wise and foolish virgins. This parable, found in the New Testament book of Matthew, tells the story of 10 virgins who were waiting for the bridegroom. 5 of the virgins were wise and had brought enough oil for their lamps, while the other 5 were foolish and did not. The prudent virgins were prepared for the unexpected and were able to enter the wedding feast, while the imprudent virgins were not. This story was often interpreted as a lesson in the importance of being prudent and prepared for the unexpected challenges of life. The legend of St. Thomas Aquinas. St. Thomas Aquinas was a medieval Christian philosopher and theologian who was known for his wisdom and prudence. The legend goes that when he was a young man, he was torn between his desire to become a monk and his duty to his family, who wanted him to enter politics. Through prayer and contemplation, he discovered that he could fulfill both obligations by becoming a priest and using his intellect to serve God and others. This story highlights the importance of using prudence to make wise decisions in the face of conflicting obligations. The story of King Solomon. King Solomon is known in the Old Testament as a wise and prudent ruler. According to the story, God appeared to him in a dream and offered to give him anything he wished. Solomon asked for wisdom, and God granted his request, making him the wisest man who ever lived. This story highlights the importance of seeking wisdom and prudence in order to make good decisions and lead a virtuous life. These are just a few examples of the many stories and legends that illustrate the meaning of prudence in the medieval Christian tradition. They show how prudence was seen as an important aspect of a virtuous life, and how it was used to make wise decisions and to fulfill one's obligations to God and others. Can you give a few stories from the Renaissance and early modern period about prudence as caution, risk avoidance, and financial management that illustrate the historical context? Sure, here are a few stories from the Renaissance and early modern period that illustrate the concept of prudence as caution, risk avoidance, and financial management. 1. The story of Sir Thomas Gresham. Sir Thomas Gresham was an English merchant and financier during the reign of Queen Elizabeth I. He is known for his wise financial advice, which was based on the principle of bad money drives out good. This principle states that if a currency is devalued, people will hoard the good money and use the bad money in circulation, causing the good money to disappear. Gresham's advice was seen as an example of prudent financial management, as it emphasized the importance of avoiding risk and making wise investments. 2. The tale of the ant and the grasshopper. This fable, which dates back to ancient Greece, was widely used during the Renaissance and early modern period to illustrate the importance of caution and risk avoidance. The story tells of an ant who works hard to store food for the winter, while a grasshopper ignores the future and lives for the moment. When winter comes, the ant is prepared, while the grasshopper is left to suffer. This story was often used to teach the importance of being prudent and avoiding risk in financial matters. 3. The life of Francesco di Marco Dettini. Francesco di Marco Dettini was an Italian merchant and financier during the late Middle Ages and early modern period. He is known for his prudence and caution in financial matters, as well as his strict accounting practices. Dettini is said to have kept detailed records of all his transactions and to have used these records to make wise decisions about investments and loans. His life was seen as a model of prudent financial management, and his practices were widely emulated by merchants and financiers of the time. These are just a few examples of the stories and legends that illustrate the concept of prudence as caution, risk avoidance, and financial management during the Renaissance and early modern period. They show how prudence was seen as an important aspect of financial management and how it was used to make wise decisions and avoid risk. What else can you tell me about prudence as caution in the Renaissance and early modern period? Prudence as caution was a highly valued virtue in the Renaissance and early modern period. During this time, the concept of prudence was applied not only to financial matters, but also to a wide range of other aspects of life. Here are a few key aspects of prudence as caution during the Renaissance and early modern period. 1. Political prudence. Prudence was seen as a key attribute of good political leaders. Rulers were expected to be cautious in their decisions and to weigh the potential risks and benefits of each action before taking it. They were also expected to consider the long-term consequences of their actions and to avoid hasty or rash decisions that could have negative consequences. 2. Economic prudence. Prudence was also seen as an important aspect of economic life. Merchants, financiers, and other economic actors were expected to be cautious in their investments and to avoid unnecessary risks. They were also expected to carefully manage their finances and to keep detailed records of their transactions. 3. Social prudence. Prudence was also seen as a key aspect of social life. People were expected to be cautious in their interactions with others and to avoid offending or offending others. They were also expected to be mindful of the social norms and customs of the time and to avoid behavior that could be seen as imprudent or inappropriate. 4. Moral prudence. Finally, prudence was seen as an important aspect of moral life. People were expected to be cautious in their moral decisions and to avoid actions that could harm themselves or others. They were also expected to weigh the potential risks and benefits of each action before taking it and to avoid impulsive or rash behavior. These are just a few examples of the various ways in which prudence as caution was valued during the Renaissance and early modern period. Overall, prudence was seen as a key aspect of wise decision-making and as an essential component of a virtuous life. Please explain the development from medieval prudence as virtuously obeying God's laws to Renaissance concepts focused on being careful and financial management. The development from medieval prudence as obediently following God's laws to Renaissance concepts focused on caution and financial management can be attributed to several factors, including the changing cultural and intellectual climate of the time. During the medieval period, the dominant worldview was religious, and moral and ethical questions were primarily viewed through a theological lens. In this context, prudence was primarily understood as the ability to judge and make wise decisions in moral matters based on the commandments of God. However, with the advent of the Renaissance, a new cultural and intellectual movement emerged that emphasized humanism and individualism. This movement placed greater emphasis on human reason and the individual's ability to make decisions based on their own experience and knowledge. As a result, the concept of prudence shifted to include a wider range of concerns, including caution, risk avoidance, and financial management. Another factor that contributed to this development was the growing importance of commerce and trade during the Renaissance and early modern period. With the expansion of trade and the growth of financial markets, the importance of caution and prudent financial management became increasingly apparent. This shift was reflected in the writings of thinkers and merchants of the time, who emphasized the importance of avoiding unnecessary risk, keeping detailed records of transactions, and making wise investments. In conclusion, the development from medieval prudence as obediently following God's laws to Renaissance concepts focused on caution and financial management was a result of a combination of cultural and intellectual shifts, as well as the growing importance of commerce and trade during the period. This shift reflects a broader change in the way people understood and approached questions of morality, ethics, and prudence during the Renaissance and early modern period. How did Renaissance and early modern concepts of prudence develop into the application of rationality to practical problems in the modern period and cautious financial investments in the modern era? The Renaissance and early modern period concepts of prudence as caution and financial management developed into the application of rationality to practical problems in the modern period and cautious financial investments in the modern era through several key historical events and intellectual movements. 1. The Enlightenment. The Enlightenment was a cultural and intellectual movement that took place in Europe in the 17th and 18th centuries. It emphasized the power of reason and the importance of science and empirical knowledge. The ideas of the Enlightenment greatly influenced the way people thought about ethics and morality, and prudence was reinterpreted as a rational approach to decision-making. 2. The Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution, which took place in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, marked a major turning point in the history of the modern world. As the economy shifted from an agrarian-based system to an industrial one, new financial opportunities and risks arose. In response, the concept of prudence evolved to include a focus on caution and rational financial decision-making. 3. The emergence of capitalism. Capitalism is an economic system that is based on private ownership of the means of production and the creation of goods and services for profit. Capitalism emerged as a dominant economic system during the modern period, and with it came a growing emphasis on financial investments and the importance of cautious and rational decision-making. 4. The rise of utilitarianism. Utilitarianism is a philosophical and ethical theory that argues that the best action is the one that results in the greatest overall happiness or well-being for the greatest number of people. Utilitarianism had a profound influence on the development of modern ethics and moral reasoning, and it helped to shape the modern concept of prudence as a careful and rational approach to decision-making. In conclusion, the development of the Renaissance and early modern period concepts of prudence into the application of rationality to practical problems in the modern period and cautious financial investments in the modern era was the result of a combination of historical events, intellectual movements, and economic shifts. This evolution reflects the broader changes in the way people thought about ethics, morality, and decision-making during the modern period. Can you give a story or illustration of each of these 4 points? Illustrate the developing concept of prudence. Sure. Here are some stories or illustrations for each of the 4 points that demonstrate the evolving concept of prudence. 1. The Enlightenment. During the Enlightenment, a prominent philosopher named John Locke wrote about the importance of reason and the need for individuals to make decisions based on their own experience and knowledge. For example, Locke might argue that a prudent person would carefully consider the facts and data available to them before making a decision, rather than relying solely on religious teachings or tradition. 2. The Industrial Revolution. During the Industrial Revolution, a successful businessman named John Rockefeller became known for his caution and rational approach to decision-making. For example, Rockefeller would carefully analyze market trends and potential risks before investing in a new business venture, which helped him to build a massive fortune and become one of the wealthiest men in history. 3. The emergence of capitalism. During the rise of capitalism, a young entrepreneur named Warren Buffett became known for his cautious and rational approach to investing. For example, Buffett would carefully analyze a company's financial statements and management before investing in its stock, which helped him to build a successful career as a professional investor and become one of the richest people in the world. 4. The rise of utilitarianism. During the development of utilitarianism, a philosopher named Jeremy Bentham wrote about the importance of making decisions based on the greatest overall happiness or well-being for the greatest number of people. For example, Bentham might argue that a prudent person would consider the potential consequences of their actions on the well-being of others before making a decision. These stories illustrate how the concept of prudence evolved over time, from an emphasis on obediently following God's laws during the medieval period to a focus on caution, risk avoidance, and financial management during the Renaissance and early modern period to a more broadly defined approach to decision-making based on reason, science, and the well-being of others during the modern period. The concept of prudence is still used today in standards of care for corporate directors, engineering contracts, and the ethical standards of lawyer and physicians. How can historical concepts of prudence inform professionals today? Historical concepts of prudence can inform professionals today by providing a framework for making ethical and wise decisions in their respective fields. The following are some ways in which historical concepts of prudence can inform professionals today. 1. Corporate directors. The concept of prudence is caution and risk avoidance is particularly relevant to corporate directors, who have a fiduciary duty to act in the best interests of the company and its shareholders. By carefully considering potential risks and making informed decisions based on reason and data, corporate directors can ensure that they are fulfilling their obligations in a responsible and ethical manner. 2. Engineering contracts. The concept of prudence as rationality and practicality can inform engineers as they make decisions related to design, safety, and project management. By considering all relevant factors, including the cost, feasibility, and potential risks, engineers can ensure that they are making informed decisions that are in the best interests of their clients and the public. 3. Lawyers. The concept of prudence as ethical conduct can inform lawyers as they make decisions related to client representation, legal strategy, and professional responsibility. By considering the potential consequences of their actions on the well-being of their clients and society, lawyers can ensure that they are practicing law in a responsible and ethical manner. 4. Physicians. The concept of prudence as acting for the greater good can inform physicians as they make decisions related to patient care and treatment. By considering the potential consequences of their actions on the well-being of their patients and society, physicians can ensure that they are providing care that is in the best interests of their patients and consistent with their ethical obligations. In each of these professions, historical concepts of prudence can provide a framework for ethical and wise decision making, helping professionals to act in accordance with their obligations and to promote the greater good. How can concepts of prudence from each of the ancient, medieval, Renaissance, and modern periods inform corporate directors and engineers? Each of the historical periods of ancient, medieval, Renaissance, and modern has its own unique concepts of prudence, and these concepts can inform professionals in various ways. Here is how each of the historical concepts of prudence can inform each of the four professions. 1. Corporate directors. Ancient concepts of prudence as practical wisdom can inform corporate directors by encouraging them to consider both the ethical and practical implications of their decisions. Medieval concepts of prudence as living a virtuous life and obeying God's laws can inform corporate directors by reminding them of their ethical obligations and encouraging them to act in the best interests of the company and its shareholders. Renaissance concepts of prudence as caution and financial management can inform corporate directors by encouraging them to carefully consider potential risks and to make informed decisions based on reason and data. Modern concepts of prudence as rational decision-making can inform corporate directors by encouraging them to use evidence-based decision-making and to act in a transparent and accountable manner. 2. Engineering contracts. Ancient concepts of prudence as practical wisdom can inform engineers by encouraging them to consider the practical implications of their decisions and to apply practical solutions to engineering problems. Medieval concepts of prudence as obedience to God's laws can inform engineers by encouraging them to consider the ethical implications of their work and to act in accordance with moral principles. Renaissance concepts of prudence as caution and risk avoidance can inform engineers by encouraging them to consider potential risks and to make informed decisions based on reason and data. Modern concepts of prudence as rationality and practicality can inform engineers by encouraging them to use evidence-based decision-making and to act in a transparent and accountable manner. In each of these professions, historical concepts of prudence can provide a framework for ethical and wise decision-making, helping professionals to act in accordance with their obligations and to promote the greater good.